Hello everyone, my name is Christina Aguilera and today I will be discussing my final presentation regarding gait throughout the ages. So we will be identifying the stages of gait starting from toddler, going to child, then adult, and older adult. We will explore the major developments for each stage, theories and principles related to those stages of development, and abnormalities found in each stage of gait as well. So in order to get started, we must identify that there are key landmarks in gait, and that actually begins from embryonic growth. Embryonic growth actually begins at the time of our conception, and from this point we are affected by intrinsic and extrinsic factors, and there is a foreshadowing into the future developments ranging from toddler up to older adult that are ultimately affected by extrinsic factors in particular. For example, inadequate living conditions are an extrinsic factor that could hinder the future development of a fetus leading up to an infant, then child, and so on and so forth. So it is important to note the vitality of positive embryonic growth beginning at the time of conception, as these extrinsic factors could potentially create physical and perceptual constraints in future areas of development. So we will begin by examining a toddler's gait. So environmental experiences allow toddlers to learn important relationships within and among their limbs. So when toddlers experience environmental surroundings, they are able to identify the relationship between the environment and their limbs or body itself. So when comparing development prior to this point, we can identify that toddlers' physiological development of strength increases, so does the velocity of their walk. There's also an upright locomotion that involves at least one of their limbs on the ground at all times. So according to Haywood and Getchell, at this point in a toddler's gait, they have little leg and hip extension and step with flat feet with toes pointed outward. Their feet are typically wide apart as they are attempting to improve their lateral balance in hopes that they don't fall over given the next step, and they don't use any trunk rotation. Arms are carried high in a bent position, so there is no arm swing at this point of development. So continuing on the toddler gait, we can identify a correlation in the maturational perspective. So this is the ideation that there's biologically innate driven processes of development. So as seen in our prior slide, everything depicted in a typical toddler's gait is not always an all-around toddler's gait experience. And we can see that based on environment or genetic predisposition that may speed or slow the process of the maturational perspective or development process. On that note, we can see that these environmental or genetic predispositions may be indicators of gait abnormalities, and at this stage of development, some more common in genetic predisposed cases. So, for example, we can identify that in the form of a toddler with Down syndrome, that may just be experiencing a delay in their development. To further improve this delay, we can identify the physical constraint of these in motor milestones. So, challenging this delay in the form of motor improvement, there is hope a progression in this stage of gait. So next is a child's gait, and in this developmental process, there is a newfound achievability of mobility over stability. So, as seen in toddler gait, there was more of a reach for stability over mobility as a toddler was trying to catch their next steps. A child is actually on the move. And due to this, there are more occurrences of falling down often. And in addition to this, their strides are longer. Their feet aren't out as wide as they are beginning to become more aware of their surroundings and attain more balance. Their arm and leg opposition begin, so in conjunction with leg movement, there is now a swing to the arm. Typically by age 4, most children have the essential ingredients of an advanced walk. However, there are some gait abnormalities that are seen at this stage, such as that represented in the picture on our screen, which is toe walking or walking on one's tiptoes. The dynamical systems approach helps us to identify that toe walking is actually a rate limiter. Rate limiter acts as a constraint to quote-unquote normal walking. So in order to improve this skill, a child may need additional assistance in balance or coordination. We identify adult gait, or ideally proficient walking patterns. We can see that there is a stride length increase due to an increased leg length or height from that of a child's gait process. There's increased range of motion, especially in the hip, knee, and ankle range. There is also increased pelvic rotation, balance, and coordination of oppositional arm swing. So, as the right leg is swinging forward, the left arm is doing so as well. And vice versa for the opposing arm and leg. As we can identify that most adults at this stage are proficient in walking patterns, there are common abnormalities that are seen as far as limping issues or distress of walking in obese adults. According to Ling et al., we can see that while gait is an essential component of everyday living, it is considered a very different activity for individuals with a BMI of 40 or more, classified as obese or overweight. The main physical constraint found in this study was the activity capacity and participation. And finally is the older adult gait. So we can see that stability is maximized in that it's becoming harder for elder adult to sustain mobility on their own, and stride length begins to decrease as well. So there's more of a shuffling in their movement rather than in the adult gait with proficient walking, where they have ideal stride length. The pelvic rotation decreases, so it's a little harder for joints and muscles to move the same way they once did in the adult gait cycle. Speed is decreased, so elder adults walk a little bit slower than that seen in previous gait cycles. Objects are used as balance aids, so for example, as seen as this elder man pictured here, he is using a walker to help guide his steps in the event that he isn't able to walk on his own and needs that additional support to avoid a fall. The common gait disorders found in that of an older gait cycle, an older adult gait cycle, we can see that the rate controllers are, of course, the aging process. So, along with that brings structural constraints that can influence walking, such as neurological conditions of sensory or motor impairments. So, for example, if an elder person were to have a stroke, there would be a sensory or motor impairment that could occur, which would make it very difficult for the person to even obtain the skills to walk or use motor development. There's also orthopedic problems that can occur, such as osteoarthritis, which is ultimately going to affect an older person's bones, which could make it hard and most definitely painful when this older adult attempts to participate in their gait cycle. Thank you so much for watching. The major developments for each stages of the toddler, child, adult, and older adult gait cycles, as well as the related theories and principles which got us to our final identifications of gait abnormalities and constraints.